All right. Daily Boy back again with another one for you. You know what it is. You know what time it is. Yo, fam, you see what craziness is going on in the world right now. You know what's crazy? I've been home. I've been chilling. It's been the holidays. I decided not to even make no videos. I was just being lazy, but I should have because, in light of what's going on, y'all know President Trump went snapped Maduro out of his country and whatnot. And I had three videos to make for y'all. The last time I made a video, I made one about Muslim extremists and that type of thing versus like just the regular civilians. However, or what they call moderates. However, I got some pushback. You know what I'm saying? People link me. People was like, "Yo, fam, it's not really Islam." And often you'll see this, and they'll blame everything. They'll be like, "Yo, it's the West," and like whatnot. And to a degree, that we live on a global planet here. There's a lot of players involved. There's a lot of chess going on. There's a lot of history going on. There's a lot of things we needed to work out before we got to where we got to. A lot of different strategies that got thought up and people tried to implement these strategies: socialism, communism, democracy, um, capitalism, all these different isms. And I'm saying, and a lot of good thoughts behind some of these ideas, a lot of complicated thoughts, complications in trying to make these things work. And you'll see these things play out over time. You know what I mean? We've had all these different societies, and we're just looking at what's happening in the world. We're trying to make it work. However, even though there's a lot of things at play, I wanted to offer some pushback on this idea that it's not Islam. And I wanted to talk about some reasons as to why I do believe that although not squarely, but a lot of the things that you see coming out in the world right now, a lot of the, sort of just not even just the hate, but a lot of the attacks, a lot of the extremist stuff, a lot of the violent ideology that you see coming out, especially in these attacks against certain communities and things like that. I wanted to say that it really is Islam, and I wanted to give a bunch of reasons as to why we can blame Islam. Again, not solely, of course, there are factors involved, and we're going to talk about all of that type of stuff. So it should be fun, anyways, to get into. The next video that I wrote that I wanted to make, to be honest, these videos should be like three. I'm going to put them together as like a series, anyways. It's not the West. So the first video is going to be called "It Is Islam." The next video is going to be like "It's Not the West," because there is a lot of Western intervention, and oftentimes you'll get the blame game happening. And this is something that we see in our societies a lot, right? Like everybody's got somebody to blame. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to take accountability. No one wants to reflect. No one wants to look inward. No one wants to believe that their tribe are capable of evil things when, put on the grand scheme of things. I'm sweating in here, bro. I might have to pause this video and just try to, like, I don't know, open up a window or something, bro. I'm already sweating. I should take off this sweater. Anyways, so that's another thing that I wanted to talk about, how it's not the West. And really what I want to show is that, yeah, there is Western invention, but I want to show how, there are so many factors that go into these things after. And it's going to be informative. It's going to be a good video. That's the second video. So first video is going to be today's video, which is "It Is Islam." Next video is going to be next week's video, hopefully by God's grace, is going to be "It's Not the West," where we will wade through a lot of the stuff that happens when the West leaves, or when the West causes an attack, or when the West it gets involved in geopolitics around the world and tries to represent their own interests and various other things, and even like different regimes and stuff like that. And then the third video that I wanted to make that I really wish we would have got to before Maduro got captured is we was going to talk about the suicidal West, where I'm going to just criticize a bunch of the policies that are so counterproductive to our own well-being in the West. And basically what I want to lay out there is a lot of voices that don't necessarily love the West. I mean, this is not even like something controversial anymore to say. Like, a lot, it's becoming very popular to not like the West. It's becoming very hip and cool, and not becoming, believe it or not, we've been through these cycles before in history where, what I'm saying, you got the anti-government type of, like, voices. Always got the rebels within every society. 70s, 80s, 40s, all of these times they had communism rising up, and, like, what I'm saying, these type of things, and the isms and the schisms. Anyways, so we're gonna look at that in the third video, but let's get into this video right here. Right, we're calling this "It Is Islam." Essentially, the first point that I want to look at is sectarianism. You know what I'm saying? So sex in Islam is what I want to talk about, not sex, sect. Wait, sorry, sect. Yeah, your boy can't spell. You guys already know. Anyways, there's there's a strict sects. I'm gonna name them off of a list that I got here for you guys. But sectarianism, the different sects in Islam, is something that can explain what is happening when we try to say it's not Islam. Because maybe it's not your version of Islam. Definitely, there are some versions of Islam that are on the face of the globe that are less extreme. Some of them are very cool, and some of you guys wouldn't even agree with the fact that those are even Islam. You'll be like, some sects, just like in Christianity and other faith, there are some things that put you outside of the bounds of what we would call Christianity. And so some people calling themselves a Christian, when we listen to them, we're like, yeah, you ain't Christian. Anyways, the stricter sects are basically, well, there's lots more than what I have here, but we're just going to talk about a few of them because, of course, we got to keep it moving, right? Salafism, the Salafis, or the Salafists, you know what I'm saying? So Salafism is one of the more strict, more traditional, more one of the sects that produce a lot of the extremists, right? Wahhabism, for instance, is another one. You got Deobandism is another one. Now, I might not pronounce these things properly, but yo, give your boy a black, you know what I'm saying? One of the main doctrines that produces a lot of radical is the Takfiri doctrine, right? Is They say this is like the real source of radical Islam, essentially. You got the non-strict sects. These are different sects now. These are like the Sufis or Sufism. It's I got it written here as Ishmaelism, and like Aleviism and things like that. Some of these you guys probably never heard of. The Hanafi school is one of the more lenient sects. Like this one, for instance, their philosophy is founded. It's founded by a guy named Imam Abu Hanifa. This school places a high value on what is this? Istishan, judicial preference or equal equity is the word. Which it was the official school of the Ottoman Empire. Why it's considered lenient? It allows for more local custom and common sense interpretation of the law compared to the rigid Hanbali school, right? Most Muslims in Turkey, Central Asia, and Balkans follow this school, which is why those regions often are more relaxed, secular friendly, and whatnot, right? Let me look at Sufis, for instance, right? Here it says that the Sufis basically have this philosophy that emphasizes divine love, tolerance, and universal nature of the soul. They often use music, poetry, and works, which is, by the way, mans are like haram. They're using music, you know what I'm saying? Now, a lot of Muslims don't consider Sufis Muslims at all, right? And dance, the whirling, what is this? Dervishes to connect with God. Ugh, harami, brethren. They're considered lenient. Sufis are generally very pluralistic. This is why they would be not considered Muslims in general, right? Very serious crime, by the way, for other Muslims to accuse other Muslims of not being Islamic. In fact, in one of these descriptions up here, I have descriptions for all of them. I'm not going to read all of them because I want to like just kind of power through. There's a lot of points to get through, but one of the reasons this is considered a more lenient school is because they're pluralistic, right? And so, let me see where I was. So they're considered to be lenient. Where is that pluralistic philosophy? I just had it over here. Uh, yeah, pluralism. It teaches. I think this is the one. I just want to see 1 second here. Sorry, guys. Looking kind of ignorant right now. Spirit of the law. Oh, they believe in pluralistic. They often view other religions as different paths. It's right in front of me, as different paths to the same truth. So Christianity, everybody's cool. We all go to heaven. Some Muslims actually believe this because there is a verse in the Quran that does say this. Some Muslims believe that's abrogated. This is the idea that some things were revealed earlier by Allah, but then were then later redacted in the Quran, and a new revelation was given. And so a lot of Muslims wouldn't agree with those verses. Those would be considered earlier verses that talk about, the Jews and the Christians and the Sabians have nothing to fear from Allah and those type of things, right? Those were earlier verses, very accepting and whatnot. So Sufis believe in this, and Sufis are cool. I'm gonna be honest with you. I met Sufis. They're chill, they're laid back and whatnot. And so the whole point I'm making, like for instance, if we go back up here and we look at the Salafis, for instance, right? Let me talk about Takfiri for a second. Takfiri, the act of declaring another Muslim to be a kafir. So this is one of the reasons that, the sects, a lot of times when you hear like a lot, and this is something we were going to weigh out in the next video as well, but a lot of the deaths of Muslims now these days around the world is caused by other Muslims when it comes to fighting and wars and stuff. I'm not talking about through other means, whatever, car crashes or something like that. I'm talking about specifically like through fighting and like murdering each other and things like that. This is it's not really the West that's involved in killing Muslims across the globe. Like a lot of times, it's their own Muslim Mati killing each other. Essentially, you know what I'm saying? Their own Muslim brethren killing each other. That's what's happening a lot in these countries. If you look at a lot of the wars and the infighting that's going on, and it's probably most likely based on this system, right? In Islam, what they believe is that first, like the ummah has to be taken care of, the people that are inside, because then Allah will be behind them. It's because a lot of reasons they're failing a lot of times to be able to accomplish their goals of global domination and things like that. I'm saying in Islam, but obviously I mean in certain versions of Islam and the ones that are often plagued by extremism. This is one of their views, the Takfiri rule, right? Is that these guys are actually a stain on Islam, and first, in order to garner the sort of affection of Allah, they would have to then engage. Let me try a little feature here and see what's going on. You guys can let me know if you like this little whatever this is. You know what I'm saying? Just gonna put it on every so often and work with it. Let's see what I'm going, right? And so, in traditional Islam, it's calling a fellow Muslim an apostate is a major sin. However, radical groups like use takfir to excommunicate anyone who does not follow their specific rules. This allows them to justify killing other Muslims, otherwise forbidden, labeling them as traitors of the faith. Now, this actually happened when they had the attacks on the Al-Aqsa flood, as they called it, the attack on in Israel on October the 7th, 2023. They basically were shooting at other Muslims that live in. If you guys don't know, there's a lot of Muslims that live in Israel, and they occupy all aspects of government. Their population has been growing in Israel over the years. I believe it's about 2 million total that live there right now, and generally they like living there. They're pretty peaceful. There's always problems wherever people live. Of course, in the West and all this, like even in Canada, we have issues of racism and various other things being accused and levied and this type of thing. So there is problems, but for the most part, what I've seen is the Muslims there live pretty peaceably. But Hamas did shoot these people and kill them because they consider them like kind of fraternizing with the enemy, kind of like traitors and things like that. And so takfiri is one of those principles. Let's read a little bit about Sufi Salafis, and then we're gonna move on, right? The term comes from, okay, never mind where the term comes from. Not all, no, so let me actually read it. The term comes from Al Salaf Al Saleh, the pious predecessors, right? Referring to the first three generations of Muslims, right? So this is the early days, a lot of fighting going on here from Muhammad's end of his life. A lot of battles were happening. Abu Bakr being the next caliph, according to the Sunnis, by the way. The Shias and the Sunnis disagree on this. The Shias think that Ali should have been the next prophet. The Sunnis believe that they follow the Sunnahs of Muhammad, and they believe that Abu Bakr, which is Aisha, who is Muhammad's, you guys have heard about this, the child bride of Muhammad. This is her dad. Her dad's name is Abu Bakr. He's also Muhammad's best friend, and so after Muhammad passes away, Abu Bakr is dubbed the first caliph, and then later off, I believe it was Umar, and then Uthman, right? And then ultimately, I believe Ali was in there somewhere. Don't quote me on that. But there was a lot of wars happening to the end of Muhammad's life, a lot of wars happening right after. And so these guys are going back to their earliest traditions, their earliest ways of dealing with stuff. And they're looking at these first generations as the best of, and there is room for this, by the way. There is Islamic texts that basically teach this. And so they're trying to, let me just center this thing, bro. I think the moving around is too crazy, You guys could let me know. If you either, I know some of y'all don't want to comment. It's cool. Y'all call me and tell me, right? But let's see. So these guys, let me see, where was I? Referring to the first three generation of Muslims, right? So the pious predecessors, referring to the first three generations of Muslims. Salafis believe that over centuries, Islam was corrupted. So they believe these other versions of Islam are over the centuries, what I'm saying? Of course, they got softer and, what I'm saying? They started flexing on things. And this is kind of true to a degree. There were times within history where they made concessions for things that Islam didn't have a concession for, because of course they needed to. They kind of had to survive in certain climate anyways, right? And so these guys are trying to go back to these earlier philosophies, right? So they believe that Islam was corrupted by culture, philosophy, and innovation. Bid'ah, brother, bid'ah. They call innovation bid'ah. Bid'ah, it's a serious sin. They advocate for returning to a pure Islam based on strictly the Quran and the Sunnahs of the Prophet, right? It is radical, but not always. Now, so here's one of the things they say about these guys. Most Sufis are quietists, right? So they focus on personal prayer and dress and stay out of politics, essentially, right? However, a small minority, now whenever we talk about a small minority in Islam, it's usually still a whole lot of people. And again, so when I say Islam, it is Islam. This is what this video is about. So I'm already excluding a lot of Muslims. I'm already saying, hey, it's not like a lot of Muslims. I'm already talking about sects and different beliefs, but there are belief systems within Islam that is very dangerous. And then there's people who believe in those doctrines, and those people are very dangerous. Those are the people who get drawn into the extremist side of things, and like, you know what I'm saying. And this is something that essentially throughout like these conversations, I'm hoping that it's fruitful in the sense that it does bring out what's happening in the world, and it does help us to sort of obfuscate or avoid these issues, both as like Muslims and non-Muslims, because diagnosing the issue is a major thing. That's what needs to happen. So, you know, if you take your car to a mechanic, plugging out and plugging in a part is not incredibly difficult. Finding the exact cure and exactly what needs to be done to fix your issue. You ever drive away from your mechanic and your car still isn't fixed, or something else is going awry, and you're like, what is happening? Diagnosing the issue is one of the biggest things that we need. We need to know exactly what the problem is, exactly what's causing it. Sometimes you have to trace it and those type of things. You think, okay, well, you know, if it's something with the steering, it might be the wheels, it might be one of the lower control arms, it might be the ball joint. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to figure out what it is, alignment, something. Eventually, you'll nip that thing in the bud. But diagnosing is one of the issues. One of the problems we have today is I feel like a lot of people know what's going on, what's wrong in the world. They know how to identify what's wrong in the world. I feel like this is the issue with and people like Andrew Tate and other influencers, even weirdos like I'll say what's his name again, Nick Fuentes. This guy is they definitely put their fingers on some of the issues of the world, and they can see some problems with feminism. They can see some problems with like you know, toxic masculinity, or they could see some problems with you know, morality slipping from our societies, and you know, saying corruption within our government units, and people who don't really have your best interests at heart and whatnot. I feel like the main problem for a lot of people, even when they can adequately diagnose something, is they can't seem to actually give the cure or prescribe. They don't know what to prescribe. So if you listen to a man like Andrew Tate, he's going to prescribe dark and weird things, and you don't want to go down that route either. It's not the answer. These guys don't have the answer. Nick Fuentes, same thing. They don't got the answers. You know what I'm saying? Candace Owens, same thing. They don't got that. She don't got the answers, bro. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, let me not rip on those guys too much. I'm talking about diagnostics. And so when we're looking at this issue and we're looking at the various things, we can see that there is a brand, there is versions of Islam that is a bit more extreme. And so that goes towards my point of what I'm saying is like maybe not all of Islam, but there are these weirdos, these sects that you might say misrepresent Islam, but it is founded and based upon like, you know, fundamentalist Islamism or Quran verses, or like, you know what I'm saying, and they do think that they're following, and they genuinely have this thing where they believe this is from Allah, this is from God, and they're not about to flex on it no matter what. They're not about to integrate. They're not about to, like, you know what I mean, mold and, you know, follow, you know, modern philosophy or something like that over what they believe is the word of Allah, right? And so here you got the Salafi jihadists like Al Qaeda and ISIS. So they are Salafi jihadists essentially. That's what they believe in. Which is religious duty. They believe that, who believe that it is a religious duty to restore the caliphate, right? Essentially, right? And so that's another thing we're gonna get into a little bit sooner. But like, that's my first point. My first point is the fact that we have various sects of Islam that believe in various things, and various characters in Islam, or you know, that believe in various things. And so when you see the extremists and the totally violent and the totally disruptive ideologues, I'm suggesting that that's still something, a problem within Islam. Now, gaslighting and saying it's not Islam and blah blah. Now, fam, you could say, yo, listen, bro, we got issues within our community. We do have some weirdos here, and you guys could, like in my previous video, I was saying, work together to stomp those guys out. You know what I'm saying? Like, not even just, you know, like it should be Islam as the first defense against religious extremists. You know what I'm saying? And the truth is, though, like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that people really, I think that some people are fronting like they don't agree with those guys, but they probably do. And you probably do some independent investigation. Like I said, if you're a Muslim, you sit around with your family, whatever, you talk to people, just ask, probe around, and you'll see if there are people that actually are like, no, yo, for real, bro, these men freedom fighters, you saying blah 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 blah, and they really rock with this, and they actually think. So I actually don't believe that. But for the ones that do believe that these guys are like weirdos or fringe, they don't represent Islam, kudos to you guys, but you guys should be the first line of defense. Like in Christianity, we do this, you know what I'm saying? We really be holding each other accountable, you know what I'm saying? So whenever there's like things happening in the church, Christians are known as mean to other Christians, bro. We're no, like the Christian podcasters I be listening to, you know what I'm saying? As soon as the pastor slips, some kind of like musician in the band of like some kind of popular gospel artist group slips, we're on them like white on rice, bro. We're taking them out, you know what I'm saying? We're like, and in a way, we're kind of a little bit too mean with it, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes we're a little bit too aggro. Even young baby Christians coming in, especially celebrities. I remember Kanye becoming Christian, Justin Bieber. Yo, Christians are mean, brother. I remember this girl. What's her name? The tattoo girl. I forget her name right off my head, but I remember her coming into the faith, and the amount of criticisms. There's a lot of love too. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean? We definitely seek to hold each other accountable. You know what I'm saying? We're the first people. If some weirdo goes in and shoots up someplace, God forbid, and hollers, Jesus Akbar or something like that, we'd be the first people to be like, yo, that ain't it, fam, you know? And we'll denounce that guy real quick. Non-strict sex. So let's move on to the next point that we got here. Point number 2. This is very important. Don't worry, be happy. You know what I'm saying? I study this stuff, you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty giggly and laughy daffy. I know it's very serious things and whatnot, but I'm gonna say, bro, like God is in control, dog. Jesus has got you, fam. You know what I'm saying? He's sovereign over all things. Like we get too animated and too amped up and too worried and too over. Like, don't allow this stuff to affect your peace and your serenity and like, you know what I'm saying? Like just have trust, have faith in God. You know what I'm saying? I know some Muslim people be listening to me too, so I'm gonna say, even for you guys, if you guys believe and all of you believe He's really God, you believe He's really sovereign over things. You know what I'm saying? Don't get too worked up and amped up and too angry and like, you know what I'm saying? Let Allah do Allah's thing. If you believe He's really in control. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus is really in control. That God, like, you know what I'm saying? God is in control. Ultimately, I believe Jesus is God, of course, and I don't know. I have a confidence level in him where I trust him to run his world and I trust him to do his thing. Now, I'm not saying that to say let's obfuscate responsibilities, right? We're not saying don't put in the work. We're not saying don't talk about these issues. We're not saying don't get educated on these issues. We're not saying, but don't let it affect your peace is what we're saying. You know what I'm saying? Don't let it cause you to stress out and worry so much that, like, you know what I'm saying, you're living in a state of panic, right? So let's move on to number 3. Who is to blame? Now, today, what I wanted to address is on the blame game. Essentially, when we look at like a conflict like Israel, the discussion can start from really anywhere, right? So if you look at Israel, like a lot of times people pan to October 7th as the beginning of the conflict. Some would say this was the immediate conflict that is happening today. This was the immediate start of that conflict where Israel was attacked by Hamas. However, some would say, nah, Palestine has been living under oppression for, a very long time. And so, the October 7th attack was just, if the Jews would just kind of leave the West Bank and Gaza alone, then that wouldn't have happened. And it's years of oppression that you're seeing manifesting into what's happening. And so some would say that as a justification. Some would say it's not a justification, but it's not the starting of this issue. Others would say there's been tension since the conception of Israel, or the reformation of Israel, essentially, because Israel, of course, was there historically and things like that. And so people would say no, actually, 1948 when Israel started back, that might be the place that they want to start the tensions from. The truth is that there's always somebody that there's always like a demonic satanic connection to religious zealots. You know what I'm saying? There's always been sort of this idea of the who owns these type of lands, and like where, like who should really be possessing it, and like if Allah gave it to the Jews or the Israelites like back in the days, or if he gave it to the Muslims after and it was belong as Muslim land, or it's not. Like, so you cannot whitewash that away. You cannot pretend like there is no religious context for why these wars are happening. Jew hate, for instance. Let me just say this before we move on to Jew hate. Uh, if we were to look back, we can go back way farther than this. Maybe we should move to Jew hate. I believe it's in here as well, even before Islam, ancient history. Okay, okay, yeah. We're gonna go there. So when it comes to Islam, Jew hatred is like a universal thing. It's a feature. It's not like a kink. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, but I grew up around Muslims, you know what I'm saying? The jokes and the like things, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and we was always like, not even just in Islam, like, but in many other faith groups, like in many other groups, the Jew jokes or something like that was a thing all the time when we grew up. But especially within the Muslim community and the Islamic communities, this is something that a lot of Muslims grow up with, this idea of the evil Jews and blah, 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 right? And this is a feature that goes all the way back to Muhammad himself when he was ultimately rejected by the Jews. He was convincing his followers that the Jews would basically like sort of announce him as their guy, essentially a prophet of theirs. And so Jews ultimately rejected him. Of course, he changed course, he changed direction, he changed the direction of the prayer, he changed a bunch of things based on this rejection, and he was mad, he was upset, and this sort of hate already started from this from these encounters from that time. And then some would even argue ancient, even this is a more ancient beef even before Muhammad, which is kind of weird because we're saying it is Islam, but we're talking about something more ancient. But some people actually believe that Islam is connected to the two brothers in the womb. If you guys are familiar with this story, there's these two brothers in the Bible. I believe it's Isaac and Ishmael, and they are the children of Isaac and Ishmael, children of Abraham. And in Sarah's womb at this time, there was like a war in her stomach, and it was basically said that these two brothers are fighting, and then it's said that this is something that translates into what we're seeing even now. And it's said that Muhammad and the religion that was given to Muhammad is from the line of, they believe that he's from the Ishmaelites line or from Ishmael. And then of course the Jews would have came from the line of Isaac. And so they're saying they're actually inserting this beef into an even more ancient context. Of course, putting Islam. Now, it's arguable whether, if you want to believe that Muhammad is actually from the tribe of the Ishmaelites or something like that, or if he's actually Ishmaelite, you know what I mean? It's actually quite difficult to substantiate that claim. But either way, a lot of Muslims do believe this, and I believe that that is a point that points to the fact that some of this is, you cannot gaslight us and pretend like it doesn't exist, because this Jew hate thing goes all the way back to those type of origins and those type of situations. And this is something that, even if you're a Muslim, if you're being honest with me, like, you probably sit around and like some of your family discuss this type of stuff, and it's not unfamiliar to you what I'm saying, right? Some of you might be clueless because, of course, like a lot of it, even Christians, by the way, let me just say, a lot of us are not really following up with anything that's going on. But if you know some things, you'll be familiar with what I'm talking about here. So let's move on to point number 5, the names of the terrorist organizations. I think this is another telltale sign that this is an Islamic issue, essentially, right? If you look at a name like ISIS, for instance, or sometimes it's called ISIS, or it's a slash ISIL, right? The meaning is Islamic State of Iraq. That's what the acronym represents. So Islam is in the name, Islamic State of Iraq. Some people will say, well, they're just appropriating Islam for their own weird purposes and stuff like that. Sure, but again, we're talking about reasons as to why we believe that you cannot just, again, gaslight people and pretend like Islam has no place in this. I'm not saying solely it's all Islam, but it definitely is a high correlation, and you have to put some blame on the fact that these are Muslims, that this is Islamic, that this is something within Islam or within some frameworks of Islam, and this is something that is sort of it's a tension that's caused by religious zealots in some cases, and there is some onus and some responsibility that needs to be placed squarely on that shoulder as well. And of course, then we could talk about other issues, politics and various other things, money and evil and Satan and demons, whatever, you know what I'm saying? But again, so sometimes it's called Islamic States of Iraq and the Levant, right? Hamas is an acronym for Hakarat al Muskawama al Islamiyah, meaning Islamic resistance movement. Again, you know what I'm saying? Hamas's name is close. It has Islam in the name. Again, the word itself means zeal or bravery in Arabic. You know what I'm saying? So these are Islamic zealots is what this is saying. Look at the name of Hezbollah. You know what I'm saying? Party of God. It says. You know what I'm saying? Allah in the name there. Hezbollah. You know what I'm saying? That's what it means. Meaning Western education is forbidden. Boko Haram basically is the next one. It means Western education is forbidden. Colloquially, or Western influence is a sin. Its formal name is Jama Atu Jihad, meaning group of the people of the Sunnah for preaching and jihad, right? So, that's another name that we could look at, Al Shabat, meaning the youth, you know what I mean? Ja'i, Jesh-e Muhammad, meaning army of Muhammad. Lakar-e Taiba, meaning army of righteous and army of the pure. You know what I'm saying? Al-Sharia, Ansar al-Sharia, meaning supporter of Islamic law. Abu Sayyaf, meaning father of the swordsman, or better, bearer of the sword. You know what I mean? Palestinian Islamic Jihad. I mean, you don't got to explain that one. Palestinian Islamic structure. Jama, Islamiyah, meaning Islamic community or Islamic assembly. Now we could keep going through more of these, but basically these are just some of the terrorist organizations, and those are the names of those terrorist organizations. And you know what I mean? Like, you could surmise, like, you tell me if on that point number 5, that you can separate Islam out of these things, and why is it that all of these groups name themselves that way? Well, I mean, I could give you some theologies and things like that. So if you look at Hamas, for instance, right? Like, this is some of the quotes from their literature, and their, like, some of it is directly from their charters and things like that. It says Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before. So it's saying Islam will obliterate it, and it will continue to exist until the Muslims, basically, or Islam like kills them. You know what I'm saying? It says another saying, another writing of theirs is the day of judgment will not come about until the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. When the Jews will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and the trees will say, "O Muslim, O Abdullah," meaning servant of Allah. There's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. You know what I mean? This is an eschatological thing, or like a Muslim end time sort of prediction, right? That the Muslims will ultimately wipe out the Jews. Again, how are you separating this? You know what I mean? It says our struggle against the Jews is very great and serious. So that's another quote of there. Hezbollah has one where it says our struggle will end only when this entirety, Israel, is obliterated. We recognize no treaty with it, no ceasefire, and no peace agreements. If the Jews, so this is another quote from theirs, it says, if the Jews all gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of going after them worldwide. So they're saying, it's good if they all come into Israel, we can kill them all right there at once, right? This is their statements, right? This is Hezbollah's statements. Israel is cancerous growth that must be wiped out, right? Of course, there's some more stuff here, but I want to quote the end. It says the only solution is to destroy it, right? ISIS, they have a thing where it says the legality of all emirate group states and organization becomes null by the expansion of its caliph's authority and arrival of the troops in their area, right? They also say, we will conquer your Rome, break your crosses, and enslave your women by permission of Allah, the Exalted. Another quote of theirs is, the Islamic State remains and will expand, essentially, right? Al-Qaeda, the whole world is an open field for us. Al-Qaeda intends to impose its rule in every land that was a home for Islam, from Spain to Iraq. There will be continuing enmity until everyone believes in Allah. We will not meet the enemy halfway, right? So this is, man, Al-Qaeda's like statement, you know what I'm saying? Establish a global Islamic state, a single a single international governing body based on Sharia. You know what I'm saying? Palestinian Islamic Jihad, it says the extermination of the Zionist entity is a prerequisite from the triumph of the Islamic Revolution and the establishment of the Islamic State. You know what I'm saying? So those are some of the quotes from some of these groups that was, I believe that was point number seven. I could say, I think no, sorry, point number six. I could say. So we had point number five is the names and how those names relate to Islam. Now we have some statements from those groups and the type of statements that they're making. So I don't know how you can look away and say, yo, this is not, Islam that's causing some of these issues. At least I'm trying to soften how I say this. I'm not saying solely again, but I am saying there is a problem with Islamic ideology here and what is happening, at least the way these groups see Islam. And, of course, as a person who reads and studies Islam, I have my view of what Islam really teaches and says. However, my view is irrelevant, really, because I'm not even a Muslim necessarily. But you're listening to the people who are talking about the people who are the extremists. I do think that, some of the points that the extremists have are the correct version of Islam. And I do believe that a lot of Muslims do believe that as well, but probably some of them wouldn't want to say it out loud. And I do believe that the Muslims that don't really believe that, they're just wrong. You know what I'm saying? They just don't know their religion. They just don't really read. They're not really hip to what's going on. And they're generally not even concerned. They don't even want to know. If you started to tell them or talk to them, they're not concerned. They'll be like, oh, Allah knows best, blah, blah, blah. Allah. They don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? They're just like, there's some Muslims that like gave me, sometimes I get into some conversations with them. It just seems like they just want to be, by the way, some Christians too, because there are some pressing questions about Christianity that we would talk about, and some Christians are like, "Yo, I don't want to hear none. I don't want to hear about manuscript variants or not. I don't want to understand the ending of Mark or like, what I'm saying. I don't want to talk about that type of stuff." Because and one, two Christians actually told me they're scared that they might, if they go down those tracks, they might lose their faith. You know what I'm saying? And so, it's not a problem in Islam alone, but like that does exist. The next point we want to make, bro, is the Ummah, fam. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I should just end this video at the 1 hour mark and pick it back up in the next video. The Ummah, because I got like 20 points to go through. I'll be honest with you guys. Maybe I'll just do the whole thing. Anyways, now what is the Ummah? You ever wonder why some Muslims in Australia or England or Ireland are just like attacking some random Israelis? You know what I'm saying? Like has nothing to do with the conflict, random people, random places and stuff like that, getting shot for no reason. Like, you know what I'm saying? You ever wonder why this is a connection? Why are they making these connections? And then when they talk about it, it might be like a Muslim from like Pakistan or something like that, but he's mad over something that's happening in Palestine. And a lot of times these are not even people sometimes like that are connected in any sort of way or have the same culture or share the same stuff. The reason being is because they are Muslims. They're a part of this ummah, right? So let me see if I can get an actual definition of this, right? I don't have a definition here, but the I should have had a definition here, but the Ummah is basically, let me just give you guys my sort of like fast and loose definition of it. The Ummah is this idea of, Muslims all being one across the globe. So when something is happening to a random Muslim, so even if you have like a Canadian or an American or Australian Muslim, and something is happening to Muslims in, I don't know, nobody really talks about Uyghur China for some reason, because I don't know why. Maybe they don't want to smoke with China, maybe because Iran and these guys are working together, I don't know. But like, there's Islamic persecutions across the face of the globe, and there's people who are doing stuff to Muslims somewhere, and another Muslim will come and take up a gun and kill somebody's family thousands of miles away from that thing, and they'll say it's because of what's happening over there. And they're saying, if you stop killing our people, we'll stop killing your people. But really, you're asking yourself, how is this correlated? Again, it's because they see that as, because that's a Muslim and they're being attacked either by a Western or Jewish nation or something like that far across the globe. They see that as like you're hurting their people, and they might live in your country. You know what I'm saying? So like let's say me and one of my Muslim brethren is discussing this, right? The way he phrases this is, your people are killing my people. Now he's not saying our people, because they wouldn't identify as Canadian, or they wouldn't identify as a US, even though they live here, their family lives here, they grow up here, they're like, you know what I'm saying? It's like they have a love, an ultimate affection, an ultimate like loyalty to the Ummah. You know what I mean? And in their head, if you're a Canadian and your tax dollar is going towards Israel somehow and funding the events that are happening in Israel, in their summation, these extremists like the Bondi Beach shooters, they're looking at those Jews as they're guilty, that they have to pay for what happened to their people in thing. And some of those Jews probably don't even like Israel. They probably don't even like it. A lot of Jews are secular. They don't even rock with the whole ideology. They're in Australia. They just love being in Australia. They're not even trying to go back to, you know what I'm saying? I mean, some of them might support, or you might say some of them are what they call Zionists, but like, you know what I'm saying? Even then, like, it seems odd. Again, it's because of the concept of the Ummah. And so this Ummah thing is a lot huger than what I'm saying right now, but it is another point that this is Islam, like, and it is the reason why Muslims like don't see each other as the nationality that they're from, but rather one part of one body of like Muslims all across the globe that are connected. And when one part of their body is essentially hurting, then all of them are then like they're feeling hurt as well. And of course, there's a Islamic text that says this actually, right? Let's see another point. I think we should be on number 9 now or something. I don't know. Anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead. Muhammad himself, right? So he has this thing where actually maybe it's on the same. Oh, sorry. The next point is point number 8. I think, right? Is Jannah. Jannah is their concept of heaven, right? And so you've heard this one before. Muslims believe in the concept that if they die in jihad fighting for Allah, that they would basically have a shoe in heaven. Now this is not totally true. Essentially, there are people who like within the Islamic text that will die and say they died from for Allah and be casted out. But it's one of the most guaranteed ways of getting in. And oftentimes when you see these like random miscreants doing stuff and you're like, yo, this guy was like, he's not a Muslim, he was at the strip club the night before, he was doing this, he was doing that, like why is he considered why is this guy a Muslim extremist? How is he a Muslim extremist? How is he doing this in the name of Allah? He's clearly not a Muslim, right? Actually, a lot of those guys do be like that. But they think that they're like messing up their life and they might not be going to Jannah. Essentially, they like drinking, they like partying, they like doing all this stuff. But here's a sure shot way to get in. You know what I'm saying? If I die fighting for Allah, it's very different. What Christian martyrs look like and what Islamic martyrs look like. In fact, when the Crusades happened, this is one of the things that the Pope had copied from the Muslims, is telling the Christians that when they go and they die in this fight, they would inherit heaven essentially. And they kind of coax them into fighting. And of course they copied a few other things from the Muslims to get the Christians to go and fight against Islam, because Islam was really effective. Like it was sweeping across the globe. We're going to talk about that later, which is conquest, right? And they were dominating essentially until they were met with the Crusaders, of course. And now of course like they're still a force to be reckoned with essentially, right? And so this idea of jihad in Christian martyrdom, it's kind of like Christ, like where you just don't, you would die for your faith. If someone was to ask you to like recant on Jesus or die, like you would take the beheading rather than like, what I'm saying, deny Christ, right? That's like what a Christian martyr generally looks like. However, a Muslim martyr is often, when you see these guys, they're guys who are going in, shooting up places. It's a one-way mission, and essentially they're taking as much of the kafirs as they can, or the shakims as they can, and then ultimately hoping to die by, like, it's basically suicide by cops, right? Like they're hoping to die like getting shot by. And a lot of these guys, they're actually very disappointed when they wake up and they're not dead or something like that. It's like a bad day for them essentially. However, I'm sure the ones that wake up dead are also very disappointed, because we know what that is anyways, right? Muhammad himself, like, if you read, this is in one of the hadiths, Sahih al-Bukhari, 2797. Now, some of these numbers be changing sometimes, but, if you just look for the content, you'll find it. He says, by him whose hands my soul is, I would love to be martyred in Allah's cause, and then get resurrected, and then martyred, and then get resurrected, and then get martyred, and then get resurrected, and then get martyred. So he's saying, I would like, this is one of the greatest honors. Essentially, I like to do this over and over again, right? And Muhammad is this perfect standard for all of mankind, and this is one of those things that some of the jihadists follow when they're carrying out these actions. And this is another reason, what I'm saying. You can definitely say this is a problem within why we're saying it is Islam, right? Let's see, the promises of Jannah, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a couple of things I could read here. There's Quran verses I could read. I think Sunnah al-Tirmidhi, 1663, it says, a martyr has 6 rewards from Allah. He is married to 72 wives from among the wide-eyed Huris. Basically, I don't want to say the word, but like, no HOs in heaven. You know what I'm saying? I know that's the shorter spelling. It's fine, right? That's what these are essentially. So these mans, Jannah, by the way, is a carnal concept. You know what I'm saying? It's like all of the stuff that seems haram on earth is like allowed in heaven, drinking and everything. You know what I'm saying? So that's one of the things too. Like, people are looking forward to going and getting all these, perpetual virgins. They keep their virginity keeps coming back, and you get to devour them over and over. Believe it or not, this is all like, and I actually have the references here. The only thing is, these videos are long, right? I don't want to keep reading everything for you guys. I do want to do it, but I don't at the same time, right? Because I know people are not interested, anyways, right? That much. Quran, Quran 78, that's Surah 78 or chapter 78, 31 to 33. It says, verily, for the mutakin, the pious, right, there will be a success, and then it goes on to say, and young, full, breasted, mature maiden of equal age. Now, it says full, sometimes it says swelling, sometimes it says budding, like that type of thing. Different translations put it this way, but they're talking about the women's, boobs essentially. And they're saying, like, they're trying to, like, describe, their body parts to say how attractive they're going to be. Some people believe this means that they're fully mature adult women with, like, of course, voluptuous features, let's put it that way. Some people believe that swelling means they're growing or they're budding, so meaning that they're actually young females that are now, because in this time, what I'm saying, this stuff was what they call normal. And, like, what I'm saying, of course, again, like, I personally believe this is just, appealing to the carnal nature of man, right? Quran 56:22 to 23, it says, and there will be huris, fair females with wide lovely eyes, used as a comparison to preserved pearls, right? So now they're talking about, again, these shorties that you're gonna get in heaven and their physical features and stuff like that. It's in some of the literature, it talks about their skin being so fair. Of course, as a 7th century Arabian men in the middle of the, like, heat of the sun, I know this from coming from Guyana. Fair skin is like a thing to behold because it's rare and whatnot. It's not necessarily racism, but it's just like, it's an odd feature, and it takes a little bit of work to stay out of the sun. And so, like, a fair skinned individual was seen as, like, more valuable. And so, the Quran is promising men that they're gonna get these fair skinned women when they go to Jannah. There's Quran verses that talk about alcohol and things like that you get to drink, so you get to enjoy yourself. Quran, I'm not gonna read it. 76:17, 47:15 is another one. 83:25 to 26 is another one. So you get all these really, it even tells you don't get no headache from the wine, essentially, right? Servant youths, this is a weird one. You get these little boy servants and whatnot. Quran 76, 19. Some people believe this is, I think the word is baya or something. I forget what it is, but there's a thing with a lot of it's like an Afghan cultural thing. It's not really an Islamic thing, but it does permeate a lot of Islamic countries, because the Arabs and, like, various other people, the Pakistanis and stuff like this, they practice this thing. It's like basically they're sleeping with men, other boys. They don't consider themselves gay, but they do this, and it's very regular. Actually, you guys should look it up. I ain't playing. It's not a joke. I know it sounds weird, and you're like, no, Muslims, no, they don't do that. They do this thing. Not Muslims. I'm not saying Muslims, right? But I'm saying it's a lot of Muslims, because a lot of the culture, like Afghani culture and things like that, it's a high percentage of Muslims there, and they practice this thing. Now, the Muslims that I know, they know that this is true, but they fully wholesale condemn it. You know what I'm saying? So they don't rock with it, but it is something that is practiced. And so some people believe that when you see these verses talking about male servants and things like that, young, handsome male servants, like, it is a nod to that. Like, that's not conclusive, but again, you get these young servant boys in Jannah, and it's all, related to why a lot of these people go out and commit these, do these attacks, what they consider jihad, for Allah's sake, you know what I'm saying? In order to be killed or sometimes martyred, while, or what they call martyred, while committing these acts, because they believe that they're going to go to Jannah, and it's just basically Diddy, like, you know what I'm saying? Jannah is a big Diddy party for a lot of these mans. Now, again, most Muslims maybe not aware, maybe they don't think like that, but there are versions of Islam, and these are things that exist within the Islamic text that validate their opinion of these things, right? Let's see. Let's see. These are specific promises to the martyr. The martyr's sin are forgiven with the first drop of his blood. He is shown his seat in paradise. He is protected from the great terror, the day of judgment. Essentially, he doesn't have to endure that. And the torment of the grave, right? So he doesn't have to endure that. The crown of dignity is placed on his head, and one ruby of each is better than the world and all that is in it. So, these mans are promised some nice riches, essentially, right? And he is granted the power of intercession for 70 of his relatives. So, you know what I mean? Like, the source for this is Sunnah al-Tirmidhi, 1663, Sunnah Ibn Majah, 2799, right? A lot of promises there for the martyrs. Again, you can see why this is appealing for someone who's thinking, man, like, I'm gonna go to Jannah, I'm gonna get 70, what is that, 70 of his relatives he's gonna get in, you know what I'm saying? They might get to not face the bridge and all this type of stuff. Again, like I'm saying, this is not guaranteed. Actually, when you read the Islamic literature, it's not that easy. Your intentions really matter. And so in one of the thing, it says that, like, one man dies as a martyr, and he says he's been given bravery, and Allah asked him, what did he do with his bravery? And he said, I fought and I died for you. That's what I did with my bravery. And he said, nah, you did that because you wanted people to say you were brave. That was said. And then he's dragged away and tossed into hellfire. Likewise, a man that was given knowledge and memorized the whole Quran and all that type of stuff. And likewise, a man that was given wealth and gave a lot of alms and things like that. They were both dragged away because, again, they did it for the wrong intention. So this is not, even the people who believe this, they're not necessarily, fully thing, but that literature is there. The fact is, martyrdom is a high valued thing. And this is why, even, for Hamas, when they hide away in the tunnels and whatnot, and when they like put these missile launchers near civilian population and things like that, and the civilians get hit, they always call them martyrs, and they don't believe. You know what I'm saying? They have this saying that when the when the Palestinians love their children more than they hate us, the Jews say this, then the war will end essentially, right? Because they're saying that these guys don't mind their children being dead, or some of the Palestinians have this saying where they say the reason we're gonna win is we love death and they love life. You know what I'm saying? So they're saying, like, the Israelis want to live and we want to die. Like, you know what I'm saying? So these are things that those men say, and again, it's correlated to this concept of Jannah and eternal paradise and martyrdom and things like that. Eternal virginity, we talked about that. Purity, we talked about that. Let's talk about eschatology. Let's keep it moving, right? We're far in this video, okay? Muslims believe that they're going to wipe out not only the Jews off of the face of the planet totally, not only in Israel, but off of the face of the planet totally, and that there will be, they would be the one world religion that they will take over. By the way, let me just say this quickly. Our eschatology kind of says something like that too. In our eschatology, you guys might be mad at me for saying this, and I know some mans were mad when John MacArthur said it, but it's true. We basically lose here on earth, and that's what Christians believe. That's what we know. Like, essentially, what the Bible tells us is after a certain time, essentially there will be, I'm going to call it a caliphate that takes over, this one world leader that takes over, and he's going to ultimately, persecute the Christians, which is, we're gonna get beheaded. Y'all tell me who that sounds like. And even the band that they wear, if you look at the Hebrew word for that band, I've seen it where they twisted some of the letters in a certain angle, and it comes out to being the same mark that you see these bands wearing on their forehead. And the Bible says that they'll have this forehead, this that the mark of the beast will be on your forehead or in your hand. Now, don't take that with a grain of salt. I don't know what it means necessarily, but I do know that we're told after a certain sign, the sign of the abomination of desolation, not to fight anymore, but to flee. And it says to pray that your flee is not when you're giving suck to the young, meaning when you're like breastfeeding, or pray that it's not in the winter, because of course that's going to be rough for you when that happens. And so the Bible actually tells us about this too, but in the Quran, they do believe that they're going to take over, which, and to be honest, they're kind of set to, like, with the population replacement rates that we're having and those type of things. You know what I'm saying? It seems like ultimately this promise, both in Christianity and Islam, will come true. However, the hope for the Christians is we don't actually lose. We're told not to fight anymore. We're told that we're going to be wiped out. We're going to be killed essentially. And then just before, like, the enemy can kind of complete his task. And the Bible tells us why this is happening. It actually tells us that the enemy knows that he has a short time. If you know, the devil doesn't have an unlimited time to furlough on earth and play and do his thing. And so eventually it is going to come crashing down on him. And he does have a sense of when that's going to be. And so he gets mad active. He gets rampant at the end. He tries to push to cause as much destruction. One last hurrah, as it will. And of course, he accomplishes that goal, almost wipes out everybody. And then Jesus comes back in our eschatology. He saves us ultimately. The martyrs who are with Jesus come back as well. Again, these martyrs are not martyrs for killing people and like getting killed. They're martyrs for not denying Christ. They're told not to accept the mark of the beast, and which is just something that's happened historically to Christians just after Jesus, just after the disciples, just after the early church fathers and the early Christians under Diocletian and Nero and all these other people that blame Christians for various things and attacked them during the Roman Empire, and then later off even in the Islamic world, throughout the conquest of Islam, going into Christian nations. And a lot of Christians took that fateful knee, and they didn't bow that knee and took the sword instead. instead of like denying Christ, right? So there's something that happens. It talks about killing the pigs and breaking the cross. The claim is upon the return of Jesus will abolish Christianity and its current and as it is currently practiced by breaking the symbol of the cross, and he will kill the pigs to signal the end of their consumptions and law regarding them. Right. So this is part of the Islamic eschatology. It says the holy hour will not be established until the Son of Mary, Jesus, descends amongst you, just as the ruler he breaks the cross, kill the pig. So this is Sahih al Bukhari 2476 and Sahih Muslim 155, right? The war of hiding Jews. It claims the final battle will occur where the earth itself, the rocks and the trees will speak, revealing the location of Jews who are hiding except for one specific tree, right? The hour will not come and be established until you, right, the believers or the Muslims, fight with the Jews and the stone which the Jews will be hiding behind will say, "O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, so kill him." So Sahih al-Bukhari 29:26. That was that one, right? It says the last hour. This is Sahih Muslim 29:22. It says the last hour would not come unless the Muslims fight against the Jews, and the Muslims would kill them until the Jews would hide themselves behind a stone or a tree, and a stone or a tree would say, Muslim or servant of Allah, there's a Jew behind me, come kill him. But the Garquid would not say, for it is the tree of the Jews. You know what I'm saying? This tree belongs to the Jews, so it's not going to talk. It's not going to tell. But the rest of the trees will cry out to the Muslims. So, there's no place to hide, essentially, for the Jews, according to Islamic eschatology. The death of the Dajjal, the Dajjal is often associated in the text with the following of 70,000 Jews from Ishfahan will be pursued and killed by Esau. Apparently, the Dajjal will be followed by 70,000 Jews of Isfahan wearing Persian shawls. You know what I'm saying? So, these are the things that, again, persist in the Islamic eschatology. It says, when the enemy of Allah, the Dajjal, sees him, he will dissolve just as salt dissolves water. Allah would kill them by his Esau's hand, and he would show them their blood on his lance. I think we got that one fairly established, right? So this, again, is all familiar to us in Christianity. If you read our eschatology as well, it'll kind of show you that we're actually on the receiving end of those promises that are promised in Muslim eschatology. And I think, again, this is another point to say, hey, this is something that exists in Islam that is a contributing factor to what we're seeing happening in the world, right? Let's see, conquest. That's point number 11, I would say, right? I think. So it says, Islam has always been in conquest, historically sweeping across the Middle East and making it to Spain before being stopped by the Crusaders. Interestingly enough, this was a command from the Prophet himself, right? So Sahih al-Bukhari 25 and Sahih Muslim 22, it says, I've been commanded, this is Muhammad's command, right? It says, I've been commanded to fight against the people until they testify that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his final, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and they establish the prayer and pay the zakat, the obligatory charity, right? It says, if they do that, then they will be saved, their lives and their property from me, except for Islamic laws, and their reckoning will be with Allah, right? So again, this is a command. Muhammad is saying that he's ordered to fight the disbelievers until they say there's none other but Allah. And, this command is one of these sort of like final marching orders. And this is one of the orders that you see from the like immediate first caliphates going out and, going out and sort of like trying to manifest this into the world, right? Or trying to like take this out into the world, this command, and they're living it out accordingly, and they are spreading, they are growing rapidly. Now, conquest is always a thing of the past. Every empire did it, not just the Ottoman Empire, but everyone had their reasons, and here is one that sort of added the gas to the fire. I'm sure conquest had a lot of other goals behind it, and this is something that you see within the conquest. When you study these conquests, a lot of times they were going around and basically saying accept Allah or die, or for the Christians we were allowed to pay a jizya tax and we were allowed to stay safe, essentially, right? but we lived as second class citizens essentially, right? That is that one was Sahih al-Bukhari 25 and Sahih Muslim 22. In the Quran, Surah 8:39, it says, "And fight them until there is no fitna," right? And until the religion, all of it is for Allah, and they cease. It says, and if they cease, then indeed Allah is seeing of what they do. So in this verse, it says, "Fight them until it just says fight the disbeliever until there's no other but Allah." Same thing, right? So the idea is you're fighting them because they're not Muslim, right? And it says if they stop fighting you, you stop fighting them. And often this is misconstrued as if they're attacking the Muslims. But when you look at what's happening, it's not that. It's them resisting Allah as the one true God. And so this is the reason that's given for them to fight them. Surah 29:29 is one that says this as well. It says, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah or the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and his messengers have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of truth from those who are given scripture. Fight until they give the jizya, until they are humbled." Humbled is a word that's being used. Sometimes another word that's being used is fight them until they're humiliated, right? Let's look at a list of Christian nations that were taken over by Islam during conquest. Syria, this happened between 634 and 638. Israel slash Palestine, this happened between 637 and 638. Egypt, also happened around 639 to 642. Iraq, Upper Mesopotamia. I'm not going to read the years that it happened, right? But Syria, Israel, Egypt, Iraq, Libya, Tanzania, Algeria, Morocco, Turkey, Albania. These were Christian nations that were ultimately conquered by conquest through the Muslims. And again, with those marching orders, right? Nations that were taken back, of course, they conquered Spain, Portugal, Greece, Bulgaria, and Serbia, Georgia, Armenia, and Israel, and Cyprus. That was taken back essentially. And so you got, let's see, this is like a full list around the Arabian Peninsula. They took Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. These are nations that were conquered, and those are from the Arabian Peninsula and from the Levant and those areas. You got Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel slash Palestine, Iraq. From North Africa, they took Egypt, Libya, Tanzania, Algeria, Morocco, Europe, and Mediterranean. They took Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, Cyprus, Malta, Sicily, Persia and Central Asia. They took Iran, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Bro, I'm sure I'm butchering these right now. Anyways, Azerbaijan, of course, right? Let's see. Wait. Did I misplace something? I must have. Where's Azerbaijan? Where am I? European Emirate. I think I might have just deleted something. Anyway, South Asia. Wait, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. Then here in South Asia, you got Pakistan and India. Of course, these portions were reclaimed, and Bangladesh, right? Then you got Sudan, Somalia. From East Africa, you got Sudan, Somalia, and Djibouti. I don't know how to say that, but the point is, it's a whole lot of countries, man. I'm sorry to put you guys through that, but there's a whole lot of countries that were conquered during Islamic conquest. Again, you cannot say it's solely Islam that's causing this, but you can say that, like, given the marching orders and given what they carried out throughout their history, given when you read the literatures about why they said they were doing what they said they were doing, about what they did when they got there, as in like commanding people to convert and things like that, and then seeing the history of those countries and how those countries are now seen as totally Islamic. A lot of you guys grew up, you guys had your own culture, your whole thing going on. You know what I'm saying? You had your own religion, you had your own way of dressing, you had your own, like, you know what I mean, like rich, beautiful culture, music, and stuff like that. And now a lot of these countries has been colonized by Islam, ultimately all dressing the same and all looking the same, and like they've totally lost their culture, they've totally lost their like identity, they've basically been conquered, and a lot of them grow up believing that they're just a part of this thing. Now, of course, Christian nations were involved in conquest as well. Christian empires are even still involved in conquest and things like that. And so, you know what I mean? Like, essentially, this is not just an Islamic thing, but it's also, again, to hear what we're talking about is conquest is another reason as what to why we can, place blame and say, hey, this is also an Islamic issue. Like you can't erase that part. Is what I'm saying. You can't pretend like gaslight people and pretend like it's not a part of it, right? Unprovoked attacks. Let's talk about that. Number 12, right? In March 1786 in London, at the time, Thomas Jefferson, ambassador to France, and John Adams, ambassador to Britain, met with Haji Abdur Abdurrahman, whatever, right? The ambassador of Tripoli, right? The United States was struggling with the Barbary pirates. If you guys don't know about that, look up the Barbary pirates. There were Islamic slave traders. There were slave traders that were kidnapping people, and for the most part, they were kidnapping Christian white people and enslaving them. Now I know people think that white people invented slavery or the U.S. invented slavery or what I mean, like racial slavery and things like that. It's not true. What I'm saying? This stuff has existed for all of humanity, all through the globe, and the Muslims did it better. What I'm saying? The Islamic Empire or the empire before the Ottoman Empire did it better. What I'm saying? Arguably, roughly about the same amount. I believe like the total transatlantic, not the transatlantic slavery, but the Britain Empire slavery accounted for something like 12 million, I believe, slaves total. Look, these are estimates, of course, and we got about 12 to 18 million is the estimates from the earlier empire, the Ottoman Empire. And so this specifically slave trade, the Barbary slave trade, is actually responsible for more slavery than you would have seen in the transatlantic slavery. Although their version of slavery was a little bit different. The people weren't born as slaves, and so that was a pro essentially, like as compared to the transatlantic slavery, where like a slave child would be born as a slave. However, this was like a thing that grew Islam as well. The idea was you turned the slaves and their thing into a Muslim producing factory essentially. So basically, those people were born free, but they were like born into they were a nation that would ultimately make them Islamic, and they would grow up with their parents being slaves, but them being free, and ultimately, what I'm saying, it was like an insulator factor for growing Islam and things like that. And so, this is reality. But the Barbary, so you got Thomas Jefferson and John Adams meeting with this Abdul Rahman guy, right? And the United States was struggling with this Barbary pirate thing, who was seizing American merchant ships and enslaving their crews. Jefferson and Adam wanted to know why these North African states were attacking American ships when the U.S. had provoked, when the U.S. had never provoked them. Pay attention to this, right? Them or done any harm, right? So the U.S. didn't do them any harm or provoke them, right? The famous response is in a letter that was sent to Continental Congress in March 28, 1786. Jefferson Adams reported the ambassador's chilling justification. The ambassador answered us that it was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in the Quran that all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, right? So this guy's answering them, basically saying, yo, this is our command, this is from our Quran, like we're told to make war on people. So here you see like an actual leader responding to a U.S. leader, where these were unprovoked attacks, and they were trying to say, hey man, we didn't do you anything wrong. So a lot of times when you see people say, oh well, it's because of something that they did, here's a case where nothing wrong was being done, and here's a case where this guy's citing that this is the reason why. It's because they're kafirs, they're mushrikeens, they don't believe in Allah, and so they're supposed to be treated this way. And again, I can see some Muslims saying, well, that's that weirdo, who cares what he thinks? I'm saying? I understand you don't care what he thinks and you don't think he represents Islam. I get that. That's cool, right? But, again, he does represent his version of Islam and what he believes in some of the things that I read earlier from the Quran. And these are interpretations of those verses. If you ask me again, they are right interpretations. Many Muslims will actually tell you that too, right? But I got tons and tons of videos of people where they're saying that stuff. One day when Daily Boy gets advanced enough, we'll just dash them up on the screen. You know what I mean? Let's get to some camera angles going here. Oh, expose myself. I knew that was gonna happen. Okay. Key details of the conversation: the unprovoked nature. Jefferson Adams pointed out that we consider all mankind as our friend, and who had done us no wrong. The ambassador replied The ambassador's reply made it clear that, in his view, the conflict was not about past grievances, but a standing religious and legal mandate, is what he's saying. The reward for violence, the ambassador further explained that any sailor who was the first to board an enemy vessel was granted an extra slave as a reward. He also claimed that Musliman or Muslim killed in the warfare was guaranteed a place in paradise. Of course, we just read those things as well. Uh, no Borders for Islam, a famous and intense interview in 1972 conducted by legendary Italian journalist Oriana Fallaci. Fallaci, so here's what Fallaci was saying. But what does Palestine mean? What are the geographical borders, right? So she's asking this question, right? Arafat, this is Arafat's response. From an Arab point of view, one does not speak of borders. Palestine is a small dot in a great Arabic ocean. Our nation is the Arab one. It is one nation extended from the Atlantic to the Red Sea and beyond. I repeat, borders have no importance. Arab unity is important. That's all, right? So he's saying, like, oh no, what just happened? Yeah, this is why I don't like this. I don't like this. Whatchamacallit. Here we go. I'm gonna just take off this feature, bruh. Let me see if I can just straighten up this thing. Oh, is it still working? Okay, good. Thank God. Let's straighten this up, bruh. I got this. Your boy went and bought like one of these fancy gimbal things, and I was trying to, try to work with it and see how I can use it, get some experience using it. I predominantly bought it so we could just rock in the streets and go and ask questions and talk to people and whatnot. And even for my workplace videos of my what I'm doing at work and stuff like that. Although I never use it, but I've been having it for a month, never used it. This is probably why too, because I can't use it. I don't know how to use it. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's see. So these men are saying they don't believe in borders. Like Islam shouldn't have a border. Like it's based on global domination. Essentially, is what this guy's admitting here, right? Let's see. And so there, when it comes to like the Palestine issue, right? I want to look at 5 times where these guys were offered a two-state solution, where they were offered their own borders and things like that. I want you to see some of the responses and how many times they rejected this offer, just for you to get a sense of the fact that this idea of borders in Islam is, kind of a farce. And here, like, you can kind of see that the conflict specifically with Israel and Palestine is not based on, sort of like anything that the Israelis are doing. It's just that they don't believe that these guys should have existed at all. So in 1937, the Peel Commission, the British mandate, they offered and they proposed splitting Palestine into two small Jewish states, about 20% of the land, mostly in the north, and a large Arab state. So they were offering a 20-50 split here, while Britain kept corridors into Jerusalem, right? The reason for its rejection, the Arab Higher Committee rejected it because they opposed the principle of partition entirely. They argued that the land was Arab territory and that any Jewish state, even a small one, violated their right to national self-determination. So they were saying Jewish state cannot exist at all, right? 1947, the UN Partition Plan, Resolution 181, the UN offered, they proposed dividing the land into two states, roughly 55% going to the Jewish state, much of which was in the Negev desert, and 45% to the Arab state, which Jerusalem was under with Jerusalem under international control. Right. The reason for rejection: Palestinian Arab leader rejected it on the grounds that it was unfair to give more than half of the land to Jewish minorities who, at the time, owned 7% of the land. They viewed this as a colonial imposition and refused to recognize any Jewish sovereignty in the region. In 2000, Camp David Summit, they offered the Israeli PM Ehud Barak, mediated by Bill Clinton. They offered Yasser Arafat a state in roughly 91% of the West Bank and 100% of Gaza, with a capital in the East Jerusalem and custodianship over the Temple Mount. Arafat rejected this offer primarily because it did not grant full Palestinian sovereignty over the Temple Mount and did not include right to return for millions of refugees into Israel proper, which viewed as a non-negotiable right now. Palestine is one of the few places where people retain refugee status. Like if your parents are a refugee in Canada and you're born in Canada, you're not a refugee. You know what I'm saying? Your family were, but like you are not a refugee. And so these guys keep their status for generations and generation. But again, there was the partition plan was, and they have their reasons for rejecting it. But this idea of a two-state solution, we have a border. You know what I'm saying? Here's many points where it's not working, right? Number four, 2001, the Taba Summit, you know, it offered, so this is Camp David talks, the Clinton perimeters offered a more continuous state with about 94 to 96% West Bank territories and land swaps to compensate for the remaining areas. Reason for rejecting, although significant progress was made, the talks were officially halted before an agreement was signed. Palestine negotiators felt the proposed land swap and the security arrangements Israel controlled over airspace were insufficient, and political time ran out as the Israeli election approached, right? In 2008, again, they were offered another two-state solution resolution. I'm not going to read it again. You guys can go check it up. And then ultimately, I think that was it. I think that was all five times. You know what I mean? So, this idea that if we just leave them alone and we just give them their own borders and, like, what I'm saying, like, let them be in their country, they're not gonna, I think, some of the stuff that's happening here, especially within the Israel context at least, and with some of the earlier statements we heard from some of the individuals in that interview earlier, or the dude before that was basically attacking with the Barbary ships, or attacking these Christian or these white Christians. There was a reason why they attacked white Christians, by the way. It was precisely because they were that. Like, so a lot of the Muslims would free Muslims. Like, when you became a Muslim, you weren't allowed to be a slave. However, if you became a slave but you were a Christian or something, even if you became Muslim, you would still like stay under slavery essentially. And so they wanted to make sure that they were getting Christians or non-Muslim slaves essentially, right? Yep. Okay. So the seeing those things together with the fact of, like, looking at the context in Israel and the fact that these men wanted the whole land, they want a Jewish state to exist there at all. They think that they own the whole place essentially. I think again squares back this idea of some of the blame at least being on Islam, looking at the broader context of everything, right? Let's see what. Okay, we have seen many Muslims, clergymen. Oh yeah, yeah. These positions are not like there's. It's actually wider than we think. Like, I've actually seen a lot of Muslim clergymen and stuff like that. Affirming these ideas, saying, "Hey, man, like, Islam is not here to assimilate. It's not here to think. We're here to conquer. We're here to take over. We're here to, like, what I'm saying. We want the whole globe. Islam's gonna enter every household. What I'm saying. Maybe because I follow too much stuff like that on my, like, social media. You know how social media be sending you stuff for sure." And I'm sure you guys follow your own things that probably contradict some of the things that I'm saying. But, I've seen that. I've seen a lot of Muslim leaders and clergymen and things like that. Like, up to the other day, there was a video released with, I think some Muslim men in praying in the mosque against, what I'm saying, the country that they live in, and praying that Allah will destroy who they call their enemies, which is, like, of course, the Christians and the white people and things like that. And, what I'm saying? So some of these men are really honest about this type of stuff. They're not really thinking. They're not really hiding it. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. Number 13, number 14. We're moving on. Wait. Whatever. I might messed up the count. If you guys notice me messing up the count, it's cool, right? We're gonna say this is number 14, anyways. Sharia law. Many Muslims, if not all, see their Islamic law and the ways and their ways of governing as superior to any other law and the way of life, and any other way of life. And most, if not all, would like to see these laws govern any land opposed to their models. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's this concept of Sharia law. In Islam, they don't have the thing that we have within Christianity, separation of church and state. In Christianity, we don't believe that we should govern by the laws of the Bible, essentially that there's should be the laws of the land, and like theology is like the theos is basically the ideas of God. It's a spiritual thing. You should be able to freely accept it or deny it, whatever you want. But the laws of the land should function separately. In Islam, they have laws. They're a political system as well. They're a theological position, but they also have a political system, and they have ways of governing almost everything, even down to the mundane things in life, like how you should walk in the washroom, how you should wash your hands, which hand you should shake it with, all kinds of things, right? And so, in a lot of the countries that become predominantly Muslim, they implement what is called Sharia law, and they have Sharia police. Of course, it's not followed perfectly, and a lot of times people don't even believe that any of these countries are doing it perfectly. However, Sharia law is another reason we can place this blame on Islam as well, because they do believe that this law is from Allah and it's superior to any other law, and it's one of the reasons as to why they have this sort of superiority complex, right? In the Quran, it says so. Number 15, right, is what I just mentioned, superiority, right? It's how Islam views other people, right? It sees people as Muslims and non-Muslims. The ideology, that's how it sees you, right? And in the Quran, it says that the Muslims are the best of all creatures, and that the non-Muslims are the worst of all creatures, right? Like Surah 98, 6 to 7, it says, "Indeed, those who believe from the people of the book and polytheists will be in the fire of hell and stay there forever. They are the worst of all beings. Indeed, those who believe and do good, they are the best of all beings." So it's saying the people who don't believe in Allah and the book, and the polytheists and these guys, and the people of the books, is Jews and the Christians, right? It's saying they're the worst of all creatures. So the Quran here is basically calling us worse than dogs, pigs, whatever animal, lizard, cat, whatever you feel like is a disgusting creature, animal, whatever. You're worse than that in their opinion. And in the Quran, it's telling the Muslims that they are the best of all creatures. And this is something I've experienced a lot. Like, people do be feeling that way as Muslims. They feel like, they got that sort of chip on their shoulder, essentially, right? In the Quran, it dehumanizes others. This is the same type of thinking that led to slavery and the Holocaust, right? So, in fact, the barbary slavery targeted Christians and others because of their belief. And okay, well, I already mentioned that. So let's move on. Let's look at a couple of, some of the passages that substantiates my claim on this, right? So if you look at Sahih al-Bukhari 45:57, it says, "You, the true Muslims, are the best of people ever raised from mankind," means the best of people, the best of peoples for the people, the best of peoples for the people. As you bring, some of this stuff is clunkily written, I didn't write some of it, I just copied it, right? As you bring them with chains on their necks till they embrace Islam, right? So it's telling the Muslims that, you're the best of all people, and then you're bringing, the rest of these people, it says, bring them with chains on their neck till they embrace Islam, oppress them essentially until they embrace Islam, which is something you see in Muslim countries. Like, if you look at a lot of countries that historically weren't Muslim and they became dominated by Islam or ruled by Islamic rule, they put the Islamic boot on the people's neck, and ultimately they end up converting. Like, I've heard stories of Muslim men being able to walk into your house and sleep on your bed, like in the bed, and you have to sleep on the ground, and your son seeing this and stuff like that. And you know what I mean? Like, they grow up in this culture and they're saying, yo, why would they want to stay Christian or other? And like, when you look at Islamic countries in general, you'll see a rapid decline, a general rapid decline of other faith groups in those countries. There are some countries now that you're seeing a little bit of a growth, like a massive growth actually. Like, if you look at Iran, you'll see a growth. But in general, if you look historically where Islam took over a nation or Muslims became dominant in that area, you'll see like a rapid decline, and it's because of the persecution and humiliation and like the tactics that are used to ultimately drive. Islam is one of these religions that champions minority rights when they are the minority, but there's no minority rights in an Islamic state, like with Sharia law. You know what I'm saying? There's no freedom of speech. There's none of that. They love freedom of speech when they're using it against you, but then as soon as they get in power, you're cooked. You're not, no freedom of speech. You're not talking about Allah. You're not talking about, you know what I'm saying? It's rapidly becoming that way everywhere. In fact, one day, God forbid, like, I've already been threatened. Like, people will come and be like, yo, like, yo, Dale, you're going to get gooned for hate speech, blah, 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 blah. Because in their opinion, what I'm doing right now, even being critical of Islam or looking at this stuff, is, should be suppressed, or like I should be arrested for it, or I should be like, you know what I'm saying? That's how they think anyways, you know what I mean? And so there is no minority rights. If you look at, places like Pakistan, if you look at places like, Saudi Arabia, like there's like no churches, allowed to be built inside. You can't go to the Kaaba as a non-Muslim at all. You know what I'm saying? These guys don't front, they don't pretend, they don't play, they don't like act like they're not, they're not doing what they're doing. They're straight up with it. They're telling you, bro, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to preach the Bible. You're not allowed to preach the gospel in our country. You know what I'm saying? You're not. We're the only idiots. You know what I'm saying? We're the ones that, oh yeah, come in. It's all free speech. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm still for free speech. I'm still for people saying what they want to say, but as long as you're able to maintain total free speech where we can say what we want to say too, you know what I'm saying? As long as those freedoms are not limited under whatever it is that you're going to propose, right? So like if, Mamdani that took over New York starts to like implement laws that then ultimately like start to, abolish the Constitution or something like that, then we can have a problem, you know what I'm saying? And then we can kind of hold them accountable. And then we can kind of like, but essentially, and I mean, it's probably headed that way. Dearborn probably headed that way. For sure. Certain parts of Europe is already like they're cooked. You know what I'm saying? They're cooked. But eventually people start walking around with batons and things like that and beating women for not wearing hijabs or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Once, it's a progression. It's just, oh, first, oh, we just want to build our mosque. Oh, we just want to pray. We just want to, why do you think Muslims are sitting in the streets and praying and stuff like that? Hey, I study Islam. You're not even allowed to do that. You know what I'm saying? It's to usurp dominance and authority and stuff like that, and to try to like, flex on, oh, we're here. Like, we know what now. You know what I mean? They're trying to, flex on them and them. Let's see. Uh, let's see. For world. Oh, let's look at this one. It says, so this is a Muslim 2167. It says, do not greet the Jew and the Christian before they greet you. And when you meet any one of them on the road, force them to go in the narrowest pathway. Now, mind you, a lot of Muslims don't know the context to this. The context is a little bit more like it's in a different time. It's a war time, and like, you know what I'm saying? They were told to usurp authority now, but a lot of people still follow these type of practices out of ignorance and whatnot. And so this is one that I would say is not really necessarily Islamic, although it does follow that trend of superiority. But if you look into the context of this one, it's justified, not justifiable, but you can kind of get what's happening here. But either way, these texts do exist, right? Let's see. The concept of najis is another thing, you know what I'm saying? So the idea that people are dirty, certain people, what I mean, you shouldn't touch them, or you can't eat from the same plates, and like whatever. And this has been a problem. If you look at, like, I believe it's the Asma BB case, like that's one of the things that happened. This was in Pakistan. Like, I guess this other auntie and one of these Christians auntie was getting into tiffs because of some kind of bowl or some plate or something she's not supposed to use, and then she was accused of blasphemy, and she was ultimately jailed, and she was supposed to be killed. And like, of course, they were killing everybody involved in the case and all types of stuff. They were trying to get her free. Ultimately, I believe she's in Canada now. I think she made it out here, right? But this is something that, like, maybe I'm wrong about if that was the case, but um, there are cases of this happening where, you know what I mean, Christians or other people are seen as less than or dirty, or, you know what I'm saying, like kafirs or mushrikeens. Like, these are derogatory terms that are used to say that you're a non-Muslim, essentially, or you're dirty. And now, let me justify this for a second. Now, Daily Boy to the Muslims' defense here, right? They have laws about, they have like kosher laws, they're halal laws, you know what I mean? And so this is not really just because they see you as inferior necessarily. Of course, it leads to problems, but what it is really, they don't eat certain things, and so you as a Christian, and even like the way we interact, like, so Muslims, as you know, they wash, you know what I mean? And so they always shake. A lot of them, if you notice, they always want to shake with the right hand, not the left hand, because they use the left hand for the washing. And so they, this is a thing that they do amongst themselves. But because you don't observe those laws and things like that, now you touching them with the wrong hand, or like, you not, I mean, it's kind of silly, because when you do wash, if you're using your other hand to wash your other hand, you know what I'm saying, you're going to get bacteria everywhere. And if you wash your hand properly, there shouldn't be any bacteria anyways. And, they're supposed to eat with certain hands. And of course, you as a Christian, you might cook things that are not halal and things like that, and so them eating out of your plates or your cups, drinking out of your cup or whatever. Now, I know most Muslims don't practice this stuff. They're drinking out of the same alcohol bottle with their boys at the club. I'm messing with you guys, but well, that does happen too. But like, a lot of Muslims won't come to my house and like be like, oh, they like can't eat in your plate. And there is concessions too. They're allowed to eat if there's nothing else around and they have an option. They're not supposed to, but if they don't have an option, they're allowed to wash the dish and then eat out of it. A lot of Muslims are even unaware that this is an actual thing. Let me see. Can I pause this? Is this a pause button right here? Nope, didn't pause anything. I'm gonna stop the video and cut it together. As I was saying, you can understand like where that comes from. Like I don't think it's necessarily steeped in racism or prejudice unnecessarily or the superiority complex. It does lend to it because to me that makes sense, right? Like if you eat halal, then and you don't if you're strict on it, you definitely don't want to like get cross contaminations and things like that. So that's understandable to a degree, but that's the concept of nudges, yeah. Means you're dirty, you filthy. There's there's even concept of whether your sweat or your saliva is dirty, right? Uh, you know, there's some hadiths that talk about Jews as being, turned into pigs and apes, right? Maybe there's Quran verses even. The Quran mentions this transformation in three distinct places. Quran 2:65 it says, "And you had already known those who transgressed amongst you concerning the Sabbath, and we said to them, be apes despised," right? And Quran 7:166 it says, "So when they were insolent about that which they had been forbidden, we said to them, be apes despised." 5:60 says, "Those whom Allah had cursed and with whom he became angry, and he made them apes and pigs and slaves to Tagut." You know what I mean? Slaves of Tagut, right? The Tagut is a lizard, I believe. Sahih Muslim 1946 says, Allah's messenger asked about the lizards, the dab, that's what they call it, DABB. He said, "I do not eat it. I do not permit it, prohibit it. I do not prohibit it," he said. "A nation from the children of Israel was lost, and I do not know what they did, but I fear that they might be these." So he was looking at some lizards. They had the wrong amount of I believe they had the wrong amount of toes or something off about them, and he thought they were the people who were transformed into lizards. Sahih Muslim 1951, a group of children of Israel was lost, and it was known that it was not known what they did. I think they were transformed into lizards, right? Do you not see when the camel's milk is placed before the lizard, it does not drink it, and when the milk of the sheep is placed before it, they drink it. So he thought that these lizards were Jews that got turned into lizards because they weren't drinking milk. Now, hadiths are very funny, bro. Like a lot of people don't believe, you know what I'm saying? A lot of like Muslims don't even rock with the hadiths, but these are some of the hadiths that like help to dehumanize people. It makes them, it kind of creates a situation in which Jews were turned into pigs and apes and lizards and all types of stuff, and it lends this like weird superiority complex and lends to the dehumanization of them. Now, of course, they believe that those are specific Jews in a specific time. You know what I'm saying? We can get into all that, but like the way these things are taught to Muslims and the Muslim kids and things like that, it ultimately works towards dehumanizing people, and which leads to thinking of them as less than, and ultimately justifying treating them certain ways, right? Transformations into rats. In Sahih al-Bukhari 3305, it says, and Sahih Muslim 2997, it says, "A group of Israelites was lost. Nobody knows what they did, but I did not see them except that they were cursed and changed into rats. For if you put milk of she camel before a rat, it will not drink it, but the milk of sheep, they will drink it." So this is their logic again. Assimilation, number 15. Maybe I'll try to speed run through these, right? Again, we talked about this already earlier. This is another point too, though. In general, Muslims see their rule and their laws as superior, and they generally, it's not that they don't assimilate, but it's a lot harder to assimilate a Muslim, and even the assimilated Muslims are seen as people watering down their faith. And so generally what you'll see is they don't come to these countries and like just want to be a citizen here and just want to like go with the way of life here, and like, you know what I'm saying? And so you'll see a lot of cases of people being killed and things like that for becoming too westernized and honor killing situations and things like that, and they see the West and certain other cultures and things as like straight up evil. And so a lot of times they do not assimilate into the culture that they came to. Rather, they're hoping to usurp that culture, dominate that culture, and then force the culture or that nation to conform to Islam rather than assimilating to their culture. Now, this is the thing where a lot of Muslims will be like, yeah, so what? Like, our way's better, superior, whatever, right? But again, that's fine for you to believe that, but this is again lending to this idea that there's a problem here that is associated with Islam directly because of the Islamic theology and things like that. Apostasy laws. This is another thing. A lot of people, a lot of the violence and stuff like that. You'll see every school of thought in Islam thinks that killing people for leaving the faith is an acceptable punishment. Not every Muslim or every time this happens, you'll see that enact, but does happen all too often, right? So, apostasy laws is another big issue that lends to this idea. Pride and envy. Ooh, they generally, like, again, with this superiority complex, they don't want to. They look at it as they can't lose to the kafirs. You know what I'm saying? Essentially, they can't lose to people who are not believers of Allah because, what I'm saying, the Muslims must triumph over them, essentially. And so, even with the Palestine Israel thing, the Palestinians never, they always see everything. They get whooped every single time. Breaks beat off of them every single time. Historically, every time they meet up, the Jew whooped, you know what I'm saying? But yet they don't give up. They have this deal. They have this thing. And then they even claim all this stuff as victories. They were celebrating, dancing in the streets. Oh, yo, we won. Like when Israel withdrew, you know what I'm saying? Because they look at it as resistance. They look at it like we put up a fight. We can't, you know what I'm saying? They look at it like, again. So, there's this sort of arrogance there as well. And this sort of idea there that's connected to the superiority as well, right? Complex. Intolerance. I talked about that already, actually, so we won't go over it. But the intolerance is the idea that, uh, generally, once they become in power and in a position of authority, they don't tolerate the other faiths and the other groups and things like that. You'll have factions of other religions living under Islamic empires, but it's generally not very tolerant. It's generally not very open. And even in the places where they say Christianity is there or something, it's not really. It's persecuted heavily because Christianity is an evangelic sort of thing. It's a gospel oriented thing where you preach the gospel, where you attempt to convert people, where you attempt to like engage in dialogue and discussions and debates and things like that. And you can't freely practice those things in a lot of those countries because, again, even though you might be allowed to have your own private religion or whatever, what I mean? And there's a lot of issues there, like even just persecution that's not from the law, but from people governing within the country. And so, like, I know countries where it might be legal to be a Christian, but it's sort of still taboo and has to keep hush hush, and they still have to have services quietly in houses, and there could be all these other problems associated with being caught or something like that. And so they're very intolerant in general. Once they become the majority, like I said, they usually champion the idea of tolerance and all this type of stuff. When they're the minority, they use it effectively. Even democracy and things like that, they'll use that effectively to try to get into positions of power. But once they get into power, which you see historically and overall the Islamic nations, they generally don't respect that or have that. In Iran, actually, they used, and certain other places, and more people did this, Stalin and all of these other people, they'll use like other groups to cause the revolution to get into power, and then once they are in power, they dispose of the revolutionary. You've seen a weird sort of amalgamation of the left and Islam, and it seems like an odd pair, right? Like Queers for Palestine or something seems like an odd pair. So you would wonder why queers would represent Palestine when the Palestinians would just throw them off buildings. But you know what I mean? Like, this is the thing that Islam does, and it will use these other factions to cause dissent. Not just Islam. This happens to other places as well with other nations. It's like a war tactic, cause dissent, and then once you divide up and you're able to effectively gain power, then you dispose of those uprisers or the rebellious, people, or the revolutionaries, essentially, right? Honor killings is the next one. In 2009, there was three sisters and their father, first wife. Three sisters and their father's first wife were found drowned in a car at the bottom of Rio Canal. Here, here are the facts. The victims and perpetrators. The victim's sister. The victims were sisters Zainab, 19, Sarah, 17, and Getty, 13, along with Rona Amir Muhammad, 52, the first wife of the father of a polygamous marriage. The perpetrators, the girl's father, Muhammad Safiya, and their mother, Toba Yaya, and their eldest brother Hamid Safia. This is something interesting with these honor killings. It's like families killing their own families. You know what I mean? Together, father and son, and like wife. You know what I mean? Like holding down, murdering their own kids. Like, you know what I'm saying? The motive: the Crown prosecutor argued that the murders were honor killings. The father reportedly was enraged by his daughter's westernized behavior, which he felt brought shame to the family. Evidence presented during the trial included conflict over clothing and religion. The daughters had begun to rebel against strict rules, which included resisting wearing the hijab and dressing in more modern, provocative clothing. So they were killed because they were too westernized, essentially, right? And you know what? Let's skip that one again. 2007, a case of Asak Parviz, a 16-year-old in Mississauga, Greater Toronto area. She was strangled to death by her father and brother. Interesting, right? The primary conflict is that is in case that her is in the case of her refusal to wear the hijab and her desire to live a more independent Western life. This is something that's pretty common. There's a murder in 2006 in of Bonaz Mahmoud. So the background: Bonaz, a 20-year-old Iraqi Kurdish woman living in South London, had left an abusive marriage and fallen in love with a man of her own choosing. The perpetrator, her father and uncle, a powerful community leader, orchestrated the murder. They hired three of her cousins, Muhammad Hama, Muhammad Saleh Ali, and Omar Hussein, to carry out the execution to restore family honor. Bonaz was subjected to over 2 hours of rape and torture. I don't even know why I try to like fumble the words essentially now, because I mean, so much is being said over here anyways. Her body was later found in a suitcase buried in a garden in Birmingham. This was like a landmark case for them. You know, here's three cousins raping their own, you know, cousin essentially, and working on behalf of the father and the uncle. You know what I'm saying? Again, now don't get me twisted. I hate that I have to keep saying this. Obviously, it's not all Muslims. Obviously, it's not. You know what I'm saying? These are probably extremists. These are probably people who are connected to some of those weirder, like, sects and, like, all the stuff that we're talking about. And they're getting it from all of the stuff that we talked about from the Quran and, like, the Hadith that are kind of funny, the superiority complex and all these type of things. There's a reason why I'm making this one super long video and I'm making all these points, because I feel like when you look at pieces of the puzzle, you're getting pieces, right? And you're seeing pieces. But when you're looking at like a lot of the pieces together, put together, and you zoom out, you get a better picture. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to provide pieces of this puzzle. I'm trying to say, hey, here's 1 point, here's 2 points, here's 3 points, here's 4 points, here's 5 points, here's 16, 20 points. You know what I'm saying? Now let's zoom out. Maybe you could argue with individual points. Maybe there's cases that you could make for like different things and justifications. Even I offered some justifications for some of the things that we're seeing. But again, when you zoom out and you look at this as a whole picture of, like, you know, what you're seeing within parts of Islam, you have to conclude that Islam has something to do with it, right? There's another case in India in 2014. Two young girls, cousins, were found hanging from a mango tree. Initial reports. Now, this, you know what? I'm gonna leave this one, right? Same thing. 2016, a case of Samaya Shahid, in Pakistan. In 2016, a British Pakistani woman was lured back to Pakistan and murdered by her father and her husband, who also was her cousin. So I guess she was married to her cousin. By the way, this is a normal thing within Islam, and like a lot of Islamic countries, especially Pakistan and certain other places where cousin marriages are like predominant. Like some places I heard it's like 60% and like more than that. You know what I mean? People marrying their own cousins, right? Wow. So like inbreeding is a real thing as well, and you know, there's some arguments to be made there for like how that affects like a society overall, and like, you know, it has some negative impacts as well, right? We're not gonna belabor it. Anyways, so yeah, those are some of the reasons. So I actually think I'm done. I'm sorry if I like had to cram a lot of information into this one video and I made it super long, but overall, you know, I'm giving a lot of reasons for a bunch of different things that we're seeing within Islamic context, within Islamic ideation, within you know, the Muslim community, that does lead to the effects that you're seeing in the world overall. Now, this video is really incomplete without the other two videos, so you want to check out the other video which I have coming out next, which is gonna be why it's not the West, and this will actually then put the ball back in the court where you can see when Western intervention happens, and when Western powers are taken away, what is actually happening that's leading to the deaths of a lot of Muslims, and what is actually happening that's leading to some of the crises and some of the things that are taking place overall. Looks like my phone is out of camera battery, but you know what I'm saying, I'm good. My nose is itchy. Thank you guys for rocking with me. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you made it through this one so far, God bless and take care. You know what I'm saying, make sure you like and all that good stuff. I'm gonna stop because my battery is done.